I am Dr. Elena Calloway, 32 years old, and my husband thinks he is the smartest man in the room. As a licensed pharmacist and the silent heir to the Calloway pharmaceutical empire, I have spent my entire life analyzing chemical compounds and human behavior. I know exactly what a lie tastes like, and unfortunately, I also know exactly what poison tastes like. My profession requires precision patience and an absolute lack of emotion when making critical decisions. These are traits my husband Caleb never bothered to notice because he was too busy spending my inheritance on bad crypto investments and maintaining his facade of a successful entrepreneur. He sees me as a trophy, a quiet bank account with a pulse, but he is about to learn that the most dangerous chemical reaction is the one you do not see coming until it explodes in your face. The noise inside Penn Station was deafening, a chaotic symphony of rolling suitcases, shouting commuters, and the screech of braking trains. It was the perfect place to make someone disappear. Caleb stood next to me near the escalator holding 2 steaming cups of coffee from the premium roastery on the corner. He looked handsome in his navy coat, the kind of handsome that used to make my heart skip a beat before I realized it was just a costume he wore to hide the rot underneath. He offered me the cup with a smile that did not quite reach his eyes. "Here, drink up," he said, his voice smooth and overly caring. "It is a long trip up to the Hudson Valley, and you look exhausted, Elena." I took the cup. The heat radiated through the cardboard sleeve, warming my gloves. I watched him take a sip of his own black coffee, waiting for me to do the same. He was watching me too closely. His pupils were slightly dilated, a sign of adrenaline. I lifted the cup to my lips. The aroma of roasted Arabica beans was strong, but as the liquid hit my tongue, I detected it immediately. It was faint, masked by a heavy dose of almond syrup and sugar, but to a palate trained in toxicology, it was as distinct as a siren, a metallic, bitter aftertaste that lingered at the back of the throat. Scopolamine, street name, devil's breath. It is a drug derived from the nightshade family used to treat motion sickness in small doses, but in high doses, it renders the victim docile, suggestible, and amnesic. It wipes memory and eliminates free will. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my face remained a mask of boredom. I did not swallow the large gulp I had taken. Instead, I pretended to cough, covering my mouth with a napkin and spitting the majority of the liquid into the paper while making a show of wiping my lips. "Thanks," I said, keeping my voice raspy. "It is a bit too sweet for me. Just try to finish it," he urged a little too quickly. "You need the energy." I took another fake sip, tilting the cup back, but keeping my lips sealed tight, letting the liquid touch them just enough to be convincing. I played the part. I let my eyelids droop. I allowed my shoulders to slump. Within 2 minutes, I stumbled slightly, bumping into his arm. Caleb caught me immediately. His grip was firm, possessive, and cold. He leaned in close, his lips brushing my ear. The noise of the station seemed to fade as he delivered the line he had probably rehearsed in the mirror. "In an hour, you won't even remember your name." He chuckled, a low, dark sound that made my skin crawl. It was the laugh of a man who thought he had already won. He thought I was fading away, slipping into the gray fog of a drug-induced compliance. He began to guide me toward the gate leading to the Amtrak line, pushing me forward like an unruly child. "Come on, darling, let's get you to the doctor," he said loudly, for the benefit of the people around us. I let my legs go heavy, forcing him to drag my weight. I needed to stall. I needed to create a scene. Suddenly, a large figure broke through the crowd of rushing commuters. A tall, broad-shouldered black man in a dark hoodie moved with the precision of a predator intercepting its prey. He stepped directly into Caleb's path, blocking our way to the escalator. "Hey, it is me, Elena," the man shouted, his voice booming over the station announcements. "What happened to you?" I looked up through my half-closed eyes. It was Marcus, my brother-in-law, the man who had married Caleb's younger sister, Jessica. For years, Caleb and his family had looked down on Marcus, treating him like the help because he came from a different background and worked in private security. They mocked his job, they mocked his clothes, and they mocked his history. But right now, Marcus was the only solid thing in my spinning world. Caleb froze. I felt his muscles tense up under his coat. This was not in his script. Marcus was supposed to be at work in the city, not intercepting us at the train station. "Get out of my way, Marcus," Caleb hissed, trying to maneuver me around him. "Elena is sick. She is having an episode." "An episode," Marcus repeated, standing his ground, his eyes locking onto mine. "She looks drugged, Caleb. Let go of her. I am calling the paramedics." "No," Caleb shouted, causing a few passers-by to turn their heads. "Do not call anyone. She is having a psychotic break. I am taking her to a private facility upstate. It is all arranged. She does not know who she is right now. If you call the police, she will end up in a psych ward at Bellevue. Do you want that for her?" He was good. I had to give him that. He twisted the narrative, instantly painting himself as the suffering husband dealing with a crazy wife. I hung my head, letting my hair cover my face, playing the role of the broken woman. But under the curtain of my hair, I lifted my eyes just for a second. I locked gazes with Marcus. I gave him a single slow blink, followed by a subtle tap of my index finger against my thigh. It was a signal. A code we had established weeks ago when I first realized my life was in danger. Marcus hesitated. He saw the signal. He knew I was lucid. He knew this was part of the plan, even though it pained him to leave me in Caleb's hands. "Fine," Marcus said, stepping back, his hands raised in mock surrender, but his eyes burning with fury. "Take her. But if anything happens to her, Caleb, I will hold you personally responsible. I do not answer to you." Caleb spat. He shoved past Marcus, dragging me onto the escalator. As we descended into the belly of the station, leaving Marcus behind, I felt a surge of adrenaline that had nothing to do with fear. It was the thrill of the hunt. Caleb thought he was taking a helpless victim to the slaughter. He did not realize he was transporting a Trojan horse into his own fortress. Before I continue and tell you exactly how I destroyed his entire plan from the inside, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever trusted someone so much that you ignored the red flags until it was almost too late? If you believe that betrayal should always be met with justice, hit that subscribe button right now. We are building a community of women who do not just get mad, we get even. Hitting that like button helps more people hear this story and learn how to protect themselves. Now let's go back to the moment I decided to burn his world down. Caleb shoved me into a window seat on the train. The car was relatively empty, a quiet business class carriage that smelled of stale coffee and sanitizer. He sat opposite me, watching me with the intensity of a vulture, waiting for an animal to stop twitching. I leaned my head against the cold glass, closing my eyes. I did not need to act much now. The train began to move, the rhythmic clacking of the wheels on the track, lulling me into a state of focus. While my body played dead, my mind traveled back 3 months to the day the illusion of my happy marriage shattered. It had started with a notification on my phone, a simple alert from the bank about a transfer of $50,000. I was sitting in my office at the pharmacy, reviewing inventory logs, when the email popped up. I assumed it was a mistake, or perhaps a down payment for the renovations we had discussed for the lake house. But when I logged into the joint account, the transaction details were vague. A transfer to a shell company called Janus Holdings. I dug deeper. As a Callaway, I had been trained in forensic accounting by my father, who believed that knowing where the money went was more important than knowing how to make it. I traced the routing number. It led to a crypto wallet. My stomach dropped. Caleb had promised me he was done with gambling. He had sworn on his mother's life that he was done playing with high-risk assets. I went home early that day, intending to confront him. But as I walked into our penthouse, I heard his voice coming from the study. The door was slightly ajar. "She has no idea, Mom," he was saying. I caught him mid-sentence. I froze in the hallway, removing my heels so I could walk silently on the marble floor. "I need more time," Caleb said, his voice whining and pathetic. "I lost the 50 grand, okay? The market crashed. I can get it back, but I need access to her trust fund. The joint account is drying up." I pressed my back against the wall, holding my breath. I know, he continued. "That is why I am meeting the lawyer next week. If we can prove she is mentally unstable, we can trigger the conservatorship clause in the prenup. It is the only way, Mom. Elena is too tight with the money. She checks everything. But if she is incapacitated, I get power of attorney." I felt the blood drain from my face. It was not just about money. It was about stealing my life, my freedom, conservatorship, The word hung in the air like a guillotine. He wanted to do to me what they did to celebrities in the tabloids. Paint me as crazy, lock me away, and spend my family's fortune while I rotted in a medicated haze. I heard him laugh then. It was the same dark chuckle he had just used in the train station. "Do not worry, Mom," he said. "I have been gaslighting her for months, changing the location of her keys, hiding her phone. She already thinks she is losing her mind. One big public incident is all we need. Maybe a trip upstate, a little accident, or a breakdown." I had walked away from the door that day with trembling hands, but a steel resolve. I did not confront him. I did not scream. I went back to the pharmacy, and I started planning. I reached out to the one person in his family who hated him as much as I was starting to. Marcus. Back on the train, the vibration of the tracks snapped me back to the present. I opened my eyes a fraction. Caleb was texting furiously on his phone, probably updating his mother, probably telling her that the package was secured. He looked up and saw me watching him. He smiled again, a predatory grin. "Go back to sleep, Elena," he whispered. "We are almost there." I closed my eyes obediently. He was right. We were almost there. But he had no idea where there really was. He thought he was taking me to a prison he had built for me. He did not know that I had already bought the building, the land, and the very chair he was sitting on. The train rattled on, cutting through the darkness of the Hudson Valley. My head rested against the window, but my mind was sharp, calculating the dosage of the antidote I had pre-injected before meeting him, creating a buffer in my bloodstream, just in case I had been forced to swallow more of the coffee. I was not the victim here. I was the bait, and the trap was about to snap shut. Suddenly, the train began to slow down. We were not at a station. We were in the middle of nowhere. "Why are we stopping?" I mumbled, keeping my speech slurred. Caleb stood up, buttoning his coat. He looked nervous, but determined. "Change of plans, darling," he said, grabbing my arm and hauling me up. "We are taking a private car the rest of the way. The train is too crowded for someone in your condition." He pulled me toward the exit door between the carriages. The conductor was nowhere to be seen. The train had stopped at a maintenance crossing, a dark gravel patch surrounded by dense forest. As the doors hissed open, the cold night air hit my face. A black van was waiting by the tracks, its headlights cutting through the fog. I recognized the woman standing by the open door of the van immediately. Patricia Danner, my mother-in-law. She was wearing a fur coat that I knew for a fact she had bought with my credit card 3 weeks ago. "Get her in the car," Patricia barked, not even looking at me. "Did she sign the papers yet?" "Not yet," Caleb said, shoving me down the metal stairs. "She is out of it, though." The drug worked fast. I stumbled on the gravel and fell to my knees. It was a calculated fall. I needed to see if Marcus had managed to follow us. I needed to see if the tracker I had slipped into Caleb's pocket was transmitting. "Get up, Elena," Patricia sneered, walking over and grabbing my hair, yanking my head back. "Look at you. Pathetic. You were never good enough for my son. Just a rich girl with no spine." She slapped me. It was a sharp, stinging blow across my cheek. I let out a whimper, a sound that disgusted me but pleased them. "Put her in the back," Caleb ordered. They dragged me into the van. The interior smelled of cheap leather and stale cigarettes. As the door slammed shut, plunging me into darkness, I felt a sense of eerie calm wash over me again. They had made their move. They had kidnapped me. They had assaulted me, and they had admitted to the conspiracy. Every word they said was being recorded by the wire sewn into the collar of my coat. The van lurched forward, tires spinning on the gravel before finding traction on the road. I lay on the floor seat, curled into a ball, listening to them celebrate in the front seat. "She is totally gone." Caleb laughed. She looked at Marcus like she did not even know him. "Good," Patricia replied. "The lawyer is waiting at the lake house. Once she signs that power of attorney, we can dump her at the sanitarium and go shopping. I have my eye on a new Porsche." I closed my eyes and allowed myself a small, invisible smile in the dark. "Enjoy the ride, Caleb. It is the last one you will ever take as a free man." The journey took another 40 minutes. The road grew windier as we climbed into the hills. This was the isolated property Caleb had told me was a wellness retreat for our anniversary. In reality, it was a dilapidated estate he had rented to stage my intervention, or so he thought. The van came to a halt. I heard the electronic whir of a heavy gate opening. We drove through and the gravel crunched under the tires again. "Okay, wake her up," Patricia commanded. Caleb opened the back door and grabbed my ankle, pulling me out roughly. "We are here, Sleeping Beauty," he said. "Welcome to your new home." I looked up. The house loomed over us, a gothic monstrosity of stone and dark windows. It looked terrifying. It looked like the setting of a horror movie where the girl never makes it out alive. But as I looked at the security cameras mounted on the pillars of the porch, I did not feel fear. I felt satisfaction, because I knew something they didn't. I knew who was watching the feed from those cameras. I stood up, swaying slightly on my feet. "Where are we?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You are where you belong," Caleb said, pushing me toward the front door. As I crossed the threshold of that house, I knew the end game had begun. They were going to try to break me. They were going to try to strip me of my dignity, my name, and my fortune. But they were forgetting the most important rule of chemistry. Pressure does not just break things. Pressure creates diamonds. And diamonds cut glass. Tonight, I was going to cut them all. Caleb thought he had secured his victory the moment the train doors hissed shut, but he was wrong. The doors did not separate us from the threat they sealed him in with it. Marcus did not stay on the platform. Just as the conductor blew the final whistle, Marcus slipped through the closing gap with the agility of a man who had spent a decade breaching secure compounds. He walked down the aisle, his heavy boots making a rhythmic thud against the carpeted floor, and stopped directly in front of us. Caleb looked up, his face draining of color. He had expected to see Marcus fading into the distance, not towering over him like a Judgment Day totem. Without asking for permission, Marcus slid into the empty seat facing us. His knees brushed against mine, and for a fleeting second I felt a reassuring pressure. It was a silent message telling me that the cavalry had arrived. "You have got to be kidding me," Caleb hissed, keeping his voice low to avoid attracting the attention of the other passengers. "You do not have a ticket, Marcus. Get off at the next stop or I'm calling the conductor." Marcus leaned back, crossing his arms over his chest. He looked relaxed, completely at ease in the tension that was making Caleb sweat through his expensive dress shirt. "I bought a ticket online while I was running down the stairs," Marcus said calmly. "And I am not going anywhere, Caleb. You said Elena is having a breakdown. As family, I think I should tag along to make sure she gets settled safely. Jessica would never forgive me if I let her brother deal with this crisis alone." "Don't pretend you care about Jessica or me." Caleb spat, his eyes darting around nervously. "You are just looking for a payout. Is that it? You think if you help me with Elena, I will cut you a check." I let my head loll to the side, playing the part of the heavily sedated wife. Through my eyelashes, I watched the dynamic between them. It was a masterclass in irony. Caleb, the golden boy of the Danner family, sat there trembling, while Marcus, the man they all despised, held all the power. To understand why Marcus was sitting here, you have to understand how the Danner family treated him. Marcus King was a former intelligence operative, a specialist in surveillance and extraction. But to my mother-in-law, Patricia, and her children, he was just the black man from the wrong side of the tracks who had somehow tricked their precious Jessica into marriage. They mocked his quiet demeanor, mistaking his discipline for stupidity. They made fun of his job at a private security firm, calling him a glorified mall cop. They never bothered to ask what he actually did, because they were too busy judging his skin color and his bank account. But I had asked. 6 months ago at a family barbecue, while Caleb was busy bragging about a business deal that I knew was a lie, I had sat down next to Marcus. We bonded over a discussion about risk assessment. I realized then that underneath his stoic exterior was a brilliant tactical mind. When I discovered Caleb's plan to drug me and steal my fortune, Marcus was the first and only person I called. I did not just call him as a sister-in-law. I hired him. I put him on a retainer that was triple what Caleb claimed to make in a year. Marcus wasn't just a concerned relative. He was my head of security operating under a strict non-disclosure agreement. The man Caleb was trying to bully was actually the highest paid employee in our current vicinity, but Caleb was too blinded by arrogance to see it. "So, where are we going?" Marcus asked, his voice steady and interrogative. "Which facility is this exactly? I want to look it up, check the reviews." Caleb cleared his throat, adjusting his grip on my shoulder. It is a specialized clinic in Albany. Dr. Aris. He is the best in the state for early-onset schizophrenia. Albany, Marcus repeated slowly. That is interesting, because this train does not stop in Albany. This is the express line to the Canadian border. The next stop is a service depot in the middle of the Adirondacks. Caleb froze. He had been caught in a lie, but he doubled down, which was his signature move. We are getting off at the depot. Caleb lied quickly. A private medical transport is meeting us there. It is more discreet. Elena needs privacy, not a bustling city station. Private transport. Marcus nodded as if absorbing the information. That sounds expensive. Who is paying for that, Caleb? Last I heard your accounts were a little tight. Or are you using Elena's money to pay for her own kidnapping? Watch your mouth. Caleb snarled, his facade cracking. You do not know what you are talking about. I am doing what is best for my wife. I felt a surge of nausea, not from the drug, but from the sheer audacity of his lies. I wanted to sit up and slap him. I wanted to scream that he was a parasite who had never earned $1 in his life without my help. But I forced myself to remain limp. I had to trust the plan. I had to trust Marcus. Marcus leaned forward, his face inches from Caleb's. He dropped the polite act. His eyes went cold, the kind of cold that usually precedes violence. If I find out you are lying, Caleb Marcus whispered, his voice like gravel. If I find out this is not a medical facility, if I find out you have hurt her, there is no place on this earth you will be able to hide from me, and you know I am not talking about lawyers. Caleb swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. He tried to laugh it off, but it came out as a pathetic squeak. You are watching too many movies, Marcus. Just sit there and shut up. The train rattled on, cutting through the darkness. I focused on the vibration of the window against my temple. The drug I had pretended to ingest was scopolamine, but the antidote I had injected earlier was keeping my mind razor sharp. However, my body felt heavy, a side effect of the adrenaline crash. I thought about the tracker sewn into the lining of my coat. I thought about the recording device taping this entire conversation. Caleb was digging his own grave with every word he spoke. He thought Marcus was an annoyance, a fly he could swat away. He did not realize that Marcus was the hammer and I was the anvil. My husband looked at his phone, checking the time. He was anxious. He was texting someone, probably his mother, Patricia, giving her updates. I could imagine the text. Marcus is here. Problem. Handle it. I knew what was waiting for us at the service depot. I knew Patricia would be there with her hired muscle. Caleb thought that once we got off the train, he would have the upper hand again. He thought a few thugs could intimidate Marcus. He was wrong about that too. Marcus glanced at me again. He didn't signal, he didn't wink. He just tapped his finger on his watch 3 times. It was another code. It meant hold tight. The extraction point is compromised. We are going to Plan B. Plan B meant things were about to get messy. Plan B meant that the legal battle I had prepared for was about to turn into a physical one. And strangely, I was ready for it. After years of being the perfect wife, the silent supporter, the dignified victim, I was ready to get my hands dirty. Caleb stroked my hair, a gesture that made my skin crawl. Almost there, baby, he whispered to me, thinking I was unconscious. Then we can get you fixed, and I can finally get what I deserve. Yes, Caleb, I thought. You will get exactly what you deserve. The conductor announced the approaching stop. The train began to slow down, the brakes screeching in protest. The depot was not a real station. It was a gravel pit, surrounded by dense woods, isolated and dark. Perfect for a crime. Marcus stood up first, blocking the aisle. After you, Caleb, Marcus said. Caleb glared at him but hauled me up. I put all my dead weight on him, forcing him to struggle. You are making a mistake, Marcus, Caleb muttered as he dragged me toward the exit. Go home to my sister. Stay out of big boy business. Marcus did not reply. He just followed us, his shadow stretching long and dark over Caleb's trembling figure. As the doors opened and the cold mountain air rushed in, I took a deep breath. The trap was set. The players were in position. And my husband was walking blindfolded into the jaws of the wolf he had spent his whole life mocking. The train finally came to a complete halt with a mechanical groan that echoed through the empty carriage. It was not a smooth arrival at a bustling platform. It was a jarring stop in the middle of a desolate stretch of track, surrounded by the dense, suffocating darkness of the upstate wilderness. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the hum of the ventilation system and the frantic beating of Caleb's heart against my arm. "We are here," Caleb whispered, his voice tight with nerves. He pulled me up from the seat, roughly, his fingers digging into the soft flesh of my upper arm. "Come on, Elena. Do not make a scene." I stumbled into the aisle, letting my head hang low, allowing my hair to curtain my face. My body felt heavy, a performance I had perfected over the last 2 hours, but my mind was calculating every variable. I counted the steps to the door. I estimated the drop to the ground. I listened for the sound of other vehicles. The conductor opened the doors with a hiss. A blast of freezing mountain air rushed into the warm car, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine needles. It was the smell of isolation, the perfect place to make someone disappear. Caleb shoved me forward, and I gripped the railing, feigning a lack of coordination. My foot slipped on the metal step, and I pitched forward, landing hard on the sharp gravel of the service road. The pain in my knees was real sharp and grounding, but I did not cry out. I let out a confused whimper, the kind a drugged woman would make. "Get up," Caleb hissed, looking over his shoulder at the train. I lifted my head slowly. The only light came from the train windows and the blinding high beams of a black van parked 20 yards away. The engine was running, purring like a predatory beast waiting to spring. The passenger door of the van opened, and a figure stepped out into the harsh light. Even in the glare, I recognized the silhouette immediately. The rigid posture, the oversized sunglasses worn at night, the fur coat that cost more than most people's annual salary. Patricia Danner, my mother-in-law. She did not rush over to help me. She did not look concerned. She walked toward us with the slow, deliberate stride of a woman who believes she owns the world. Her heels crunched on the gravel, the sound getting louder and closer. She stopped 3 feet away from where I was kneeling in the dirt. She looked down at me with an expression of pure disgust, as if I were a stain on her expensive rug. "Did she sign the papers?" Patricia asked. No hello, no asking if I was breathing, just the business of stripping me of my life. Caleb flinched. "Not yet, Mom." There was a problem. Patricia's eyes narrowed behind her dark glasses. "What kind of problem, Caleb? You had 2 hours." "He is the problem," Caleb said, jerking his thumb back toward the train. Patricia looked up, and for the first time she saw Marcus standing in the open doorway of the train car. He loomed there, a dark sentinel against the light from the cabin. He had not stepped off onto the gravel. That was the plan. He could not be seen getting into the van. He had to be the witness who was left behind, the frantic relative who saw his sister-in-law being abducted. Marcus. Patricia spat the name like a curse word. "What is he doing here?" "He followed us," Caleb explained quickly, his voice rising in panic. "He knows something is wrong. We have to go, Mom, now." Marcus took a step forward, his boots clanging on the metal stairs. He looked ready to fight, ready to tear them apart with his bare hands. I could see the rage vibrating off him. It was not acting. He truly hated them for what they were doing to me. "Let her go!" Patricia. Marcus shouted, his voice echoing off the trees. "You are making a mistake. The police are already on their way." Patricia laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Let them come. By the time they get here, we will be long gone, and Elena will be safely tucked away in Dr. Aris's care. She is sick, Marcus. Look at her. She can't even stand up." She gestured to her hired driver, a massive man with a thick neck and dead eyes who had stepped out of the van. "Get her in the car," Patricia ordered. The driver moved toward me, but before he could touch me, I initiated the next phase of my delay tactic. I needed to see the license plate. I needed to see if there were other cars hidden in the tree line. I needed 30 seconds. I pitched forward onto my hands and began to retch. It was a violent, dry heave that shook my entire body. I made it sound wet and uncontrolled. "Oh God, she is throwing up," Caleb groaned, stepping back to avoid getting splatter on his shoes. "Gross," Patricia muttered, covering her nose with a gloved hand. "Just grab her, you idiot. We do not have time for this." I gagged again, my face inches from the dirt. Through the tears in my eyes, I scanned the undercarriage of the van. Mud on the tires, red clay. That meant they had come from the secondary access road, not the highway. Good to know. I glanced to the left, scanning the darkness. No support vehicles, just them. They were arrogant enough to think they could pull this off alone. I looked up at the license plate as I wiped a string of saliva from my chin. It was a dealer plate. Untraceable to them, but easily traceable for my team. Marcus shouted again from the train. "I am warning you." Patricia Caleb turned and shoved Marcus back toward the stairs just as Marcus feigned a lunge. It was a clumsy scuffle. Caleb, feeling emboldened by his mother's presence, pulled a small taser from his coat pocket and sparked it in Marcus's face. "Back off, Marcus." Caleb screamed. Marcus stumbled back, hands raised. He looked at me one last time. His eyes were wide, filled with a desperate apology that I knew he didn't need to make. We locked eyes for a split second. "Go," I mouthed silently. He understood. He stepped back into the train car, allowing the doors to begin their closing sequence. He had played his part perfectly. He was the witness. He was the alibi. And now he was free to initiate the extraction protocol. The driver grabbed me by the back of my coat, lifting me up like a rag doll. I went limp, letting my feet drag through the gravel, leaving a trail that forensics would find later. "Throw her in the back," Patricia commanded, turning on her heel and marching back to the passenger seat. They shoved me into the dark, cavernous rear of the van. I tumbled onto the floor, bumping my head against a spare tire. The smell of gasoline and old fast food wrappers assaulted my senses. Caleb scrambled in after me, slamming the heavy sliding door shut. The sound was final, like a cell door locking. "Drive," Patricia yelled from the front. As the van lurched forward, throwing me against the metal wall, I felt a strange sense of relief. The hardest part was over. I was inside. I was the virus in their system. Caleb sat on the bench seat above me, panting heavily. He looked at me, his face illuminated by the passing streetlights. "You made a mess of everything, Elena," he whispered, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Why couldn't you just sign the papers at home?" I lay on the floor listening to the gravel crunch under the tires, turning into the smooth hum of asphalt. I closed my eyes and let the darkness take me, not because I was tired, but because I needed to save my energy for the final act. They thought they had captured a queen. They did not realize they had just locked themselves in a cage with a tiger. The tires crunched over the final stretch of gravel, and the van came to an abrupt halt. The engine was cut, killing the vibration that had been rattling my bones for the last hour. Silence descended on the vehicle, heavy and suffocating. It was the kind of silence that usually precedes an execution. I lay still on the floor of the van, keeping my breathing shallow and uneven. My heart was beating a steady rhythm against my ribs, a stark contrast to the chaotic performance I was putting on for my captors. I was not afraid. I was focused. I was recording. "We are here," Patricia announced from the front seat, her voice sharp with anticipation. "Get her out." The sliding door was wrenched open, and the cold night air rushed in, biting at my exposed skin. I squeezed my eyes shut for a moment, adjusting to the sudden flood of floodlights that illuminated the driveway. Hands grabbed my ankles, rough and impatient. It was the driver. He hauled me out of the van like a sack of unwanted laundry, his grip bruising my calves. I let out a low moan, allowing my limbs to flail helplessly as my feet hit the ground. "Stand up, Elena," Caleb hissed, grabbing my arm to stabilize me. "Stop acting like a child." I forced my eyes open, blinking rapidly against the glare. We were standing in front of a sprawling estate that looked less like a home and more like a mausoleum. It was a massive stone structure hidden deep within the woods of upstate New York. The windows were dark and narrow, like unblinking eyes staring down at us. But it was the perimeter that caught my attention. A 12-foot iron fence surrounded the property, topped with razor wire that glinted in the moonlight. This was not a vacation home. This was not a wellness retreat. It was a prison designed to keep the world out and the secrets in. I recognized the architecture. It was a defunct psychiatric facility that had been sold quietly on the private market 3 months ago. My team had flagged the transaction, but seeing it in person confirmed exactly how long Caleb and his mother had been planning this. They had not just decided to rob me on a whim. They had built a cage and waited for the right moment to lock me inside. The front door of the mansion opened, and a warm, golden light spilled out onto the porch. 2 figures stepped out. One was a woman I knew well, Jessica Danner King, Caleb's younger sister and Marcus's wife. She was wearing a cocktail dress and holding a glass of wine, looking as if she were hosting a dinner party rather than participating in a kidnapping. Her face was flushed with excitement, her eyes bright with malice. She had always hated me. She hated that I was a Calloway. She hated that I had my own money while she had to beg her mother for an allowance. But most of all, she hated that I had married her brother and become the center of the family's attention. Behind her stood a man I did not know personally, but recognized instantly by type. He was short-balding and wearing a suit that cost more than the van we had just arrived in. He clutched a leather briefcase to his chest like a shield. This was the dirty lawyer, the man who knew how to twist the law until it strangled the truth. "Well, look who finally arrived," Jessica called out, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. She took a sip of her wine, watching me sway on my feet. "She looks terrible, Caleb. Did you give her the full dose?" "Enough to keep her compliant," Caleb muttered, dragging me up the stairs. Jessica stepped aside to let us pass. She did not ask about her husband. She did not ask where Marcus was. She knew exactly what the plan was. In her mind, Marcus was just collateral damage, a necessary sacrifice to secure the family fortune. The betrayal stung not for me, but for Marcus. He had loved her. He had protected her. And she had sold him out for a share of my inheritance. We moved into the foyer. The house smelled of dust and old wood, masked by the scent of expensive scented candles that Jessica must have lit to set the mood. The furniture was covered in white sheets, giving the room a ghostly abandoned feel. They shoved me onto a dusty velvet sofa in the center of the living room. I slumped forward, letting my hair fall over my face, acting the part of the broken, drugged wife. But under the curtain of my hair, my eyes were darting around the room. I was checking the corners. I was checking the ceiling. I spotted it immediately. A small red light blinking in the crown molding. One of the hidden cameras my security team had installed when I purchased the property through a shell corporation 2 weeks ago. They thought they had brought me to their safe house. They did not know they had brought me to my own recording studio. The lawyer stepped forward, placing his briefcase on a coffee table that he had cleared of dust. He opened it with a decisive click, revealing a stack of documents thick enough to ruin a life. "Is she lucid enough to sign?" He asked, his voice oily and fast. "We need this notarized before midnight to file the emergency motion with the court tomorrow morning." "She is awake," Patricia said, walking in behind us and throwing her fur coat onto a chair. "She knows what is happening. Don't you, Elena?" I lifted my head slowly. I let my jaw hang loose, my eyes unfocused. "Water," I croaked. "Please." "Ignore her," Jessica said, snapping her fingers in front of my face. "Focus, Elena. We are here to help you." The lawyer pulled a document from the stack and held it up. It was a petition for an involuntary conservatorship. "Dr. Calloway." He began adopting a tone of professional concern that made my stomach turn. "My name is Arthur Sterling. I represent your husband and his family. Due to your recent history of erratic behavior, substance abuse, and financial instability, your family has decided to intervene." I almost laughed. Substance abuse, financial instability. The projection was staggering. "What is this?" I whispered, pointing a shaking finger at the paper. "It is an intervention," Elena Caleb said, crouching down in front of me. He took my hand, his palms sweating. "We love you. We cannot watch you destroy yourself anymore. You are not well. You have been making bad decisions. You are paranoid. You are forgetting things." He squeezed my hand hard, a silent threat masked as comfort. "We are going to take care of everything," he continued. "The company, the accounts, the properties. Mr. Sterling has drawn up a power of attorney that grants me temporary control over the Calloway Group and your personal assets. It is just until you get better. Until I get better. That was the lie. If I signed that paper, I would never get better. I would be medicated into oblivion, locked in this house while they drained my accounts and dismantled my father's legacy. Jessica leaned over the back of the sofa, smiling down at me. "It is for the best, Elena," she purred. "You are clearly unfit to run a multi-billion-dollar corporation. I mean, look at you. You can barely sit up. Imagine what the board of directors would say if they saw you like this." They had planned this perfectly. They would use the footage of me drugged and disoriented to prove I was mentally incompetent. They would use the testimony of the family to paint me as a danger to myself. And with a judge in their pocket or a lawyer like Sterling, they would get the emergency order. I looked at the lawyer, and if I do not sign, I asked, my voice gaining a fraction of its strength. Mr. Sterling sighed as if bored by my resistance. "Then we proceed with the involuntary commitment," he said flatly. "We have a doctor on call who is prepared to testify that you are in the middle of a psychotic break. You will be institutionalized, Elena. It will be messy. It will be public. And you will lose control anyway. This way is quieter, more dignified. Dignified." They dared to talk about dignity while kidnapping me. Patricia stepped into my line of sight, blocking the view of the door. "Just sign the damn paper, Elena," she snapped, losing her patience. "We are done playing games. You are not leaving this house until Caleb is the acting CEO of Callaway Pharmaceuticals. Do you understand?" I looked at them, the four of them. Caleb, the weak husband, Patricia, the greedy matriarch, Jessica, the jealous sister, and Sterling, the hired gun. They stood in a circle around me, vultures waiting for the animal to stop breathing. They thought I was trapped. They thought the high walls and the razor wire were keeping me in. I let out a long, shaky breath. I needed to push them one step further. I needed them to admit it on tape. I needed the explicit threat. "You just want the money," I said quietly. "You do not care about my health." Caleb stood up, his face hardening. "It is our money, Elena," he said, his voice cold and entitled. "We are married. What is yours is mine. And you have been holding out on me for too long. You treat me like an employee instead of a partner. Well, now I am the boss." He grabbed the pen from the lawyer and shoved it into my hand. "Sign it," he ordered. "Or the next thing I put in your drink won't just make you sleepy. It will make sure you never wake up." There it was, the death threat. The final piece of evidence I needed to bury them all. I looked down at the paper. The words swam before my eyes, but not because of the drug. I was reading the clauses. Total control, unrestricted access. It was a death warrant for my freedom. My hand trembled as I brought the pen to the paper. I could feel their collective anticipation. The air in the room was electric with their greed. They were so close to the finish line they could taste it. I hesitated, letting the pen hover over the signature line. "Is Marcus okay?" I asked, suddenly looking at Jessica. Jessica rolled her eyes. "Who cares?" she said. "He is probably walking back to the city by now. He is useless, Elena. Just like you." I smiled. It was a small, broken smile, but it was the first real expression I had shown all night. "You are wrong, Jessica," I whispered. "He is not useless, and neither am I." I pressed the pen to the paper, but I did not sign my name. I did not sign Elena Callaway. I drew a single straight line through the signature box. Then I dropped the pen on the floor. It clattered on the hardwood, echoing like a gunshot in the silent house. "I am not signing anything," I said, my voice dropping the slur entirely. "And Caleb, you might want to check your bank account. I think your card just got declined." The refusal to sign the papers in the foyer was my first act of open rebellion, but it was met with immediate physical force. Caleb did not hesitate. The moment the pen hit the floor, he grabbed me by the hair, yanking my head back until I was staring at the water-stained ceiling. "You think this is a game?" he hissed, his spit landing on my cheek. "You think you can just say no?" He dragged me across the hardwood floor, my heels scraping uselessly against the polished wood. Jessica and the lawyer watched with cold indifference, sipping their wine, as if this were merely a scene in a play they found mildly entertaining. Patricia barked orders from behind us, telling Caleb to get me out of sight before I stained the rug. They took me down a long hallway that smelled of bleach and damp plaster. At the end of the hall was a heavy steel door. Caleb punched a code into the keypad, a code I memorized instantly, even through my feigned haze. 4921. The door buzzed and clicked open. He shoved me inside and the door slammed shut behind us, engaging with a heavy mechanical thud that vibrated through the floorboards. I looked around. I was in the White Room. It was a space designed for psychological deconstruction. The walls were padded with white acoustic foam. The floor was white linoleum. The only furniture was a single white metal chair bolted to the center of the floor and a cot in the corner with a thin white sheet. There were no windows. There were no clocks. There was no way to tell if it was day or night. It was a sensory deprivation chamber meant to break the will of even the strongest patient. And of course there was no signal. My phone had been taken hours ago, but even if I had it, the walls were likely lined with lead or copper mesh to block all transmission. Caleb stood by the door adjusting his tie. He took a deep breath, smoothing his hair and wiping the sweat from his upper lip. In the blink of an eye, his demeanor changed. The snarling, abusive husband vanished. In his place stood the grieving martyr, the loving partner burdened by his wife's tragic decline. It was a terrifying transformation to watch. It proved that everything he had ever shown me, love, kindness, concern, had been a performance. He was not a businessman, he was an actor, and I had been his audience of one for 3 years. He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. I saw the red dot of the recording indicator. Action. "Elena, darling," he said, his voice trembling with fake emotion. "Please look at me. I know you are confused. I know you are scared, but we are here to help you." He moved the camera closer, zooming in on my face. He reached out and deliberately messed up my hair, pulling a few strands loose so they hung over my eyes. He smeared my lipstick with his thumb, making me look manic and unkempt. I sat on the metal chair, letting my body slump. I allowed my eyes to roll back slightly, focusing on a spot on the wall over his shoulder. I decided to give him exactly what he wanted. If he wanted a crazy wife, I would give him a performance worthy of an Academy Award. "Who are you?" I whispered, letting my voice crack. "Where is my father? I want to go to the circus." "Perfect." Caleb suppressed a smile. He kept the camera steady, circling me like a shark. "Your father passed away 10 years ago, sweetheart," he said, his voice dripping with condescending pity. "Do you remember? You are having an episode again. You tried to hurt yourself on the train. Do you remember that?" I started to rock back and forth, hugging my knees to my chest. I knew that repetitive motion was a classic sign of institutionalization. It would look great in court. "I did not hurt anyone," I mumbled. "The butterflies told me to fly." Caleb moved in for the kill shot. He knelt down so his face was next to mine, framing us both in the shot. He looked directly into the lens, his eyes glistening with summoned tears. "I am recording this for Dr. Aris," he said, addressing the camera. "My wife, Elena Calloway, is currently in a state of acute psychosis. She has refused voluntary treatment. She is a danger to herself and others. I am requesting an emergency conservatorship to ensure her safety and the safety of her estate." He turned to me, stroking my cheek. "Say goodbye to the camera, Elena." I looked into the lens, but I did not see a camera. I saw the jury. I saw the judge. And I saw the millions of people who would eventually watch this footage, not as evidence of my insanity, but as evidence of his depravity. "Goodbye," I whispered. Caleb cut the recording. The sad husband act dropped instantly. He stood up and shoved his phone back into his pocket. "That should be enough," he muttered. "Sterling can use that to get the emergency order signed by morning. You are done, Elena. You are officially crazy." The door buzzed again. This time it was Patricia who entered. She brought a wave of cold air and the scent of expensive perfume into the sterile room. She did not look at my face. She did not look at the conditions of the room. Her eyes went immediately to my hands resting on my knees, specifically to my left hand. "That ring," she said, pointing a manicured finger. "Take it off." I instinctively covered my left hand with my right. The ring was not just a piece of jewelry. It was a 5-carat flawless blue diamond set in platinum. It had belonged to my grandmother, the matriarch of the Calloway family. It was the only thing I had left of her. It was a symbol of my lineage, my history, and the empire I was born to lead. Caleb had used it to propose, but it was my ring. It had always been my ring. Patricia walked over her heels, clicking sharply on the linoleum. "You heard me," she snapped. "Give it to me." "Why?" I asked, dropping the crazy act for a second, my voice hard and cold. "It is mine," Patricia laughed, a harsh, cruel sound that bounced off the padded walls. "Nothing is yours anymore, dear. You are a mental patient. Mental patients are not allowed to have sharp objects or valuable items. You might swallow it. You might lose it." She grabbed my wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. Her nails dug into my skin. "Give it to me," she hissed. I struggled, not enough to overpower her, but enough to make it difficult. I wanted her fingerprints on my skin. I wanted the DNA evidence of the assault. "No," I cried out, pulling my hand back. "Get away from me!" Caleb stepped forward, pinning my shoulders to the chair. "Just let her take it, Elena," he said, bored. "Stop fighting. It is just a rock." "It is my grandmother's ring," I screamed. Patricia didn't care. She grabbed my finger and yanked. The metal scraped against my knuckle, tearing the skin. The pain was sharp and immediate. She twisted the ring ruthlessly, not caring if she broke my finger in the process. With one final violent tug, the ring slid off. Patricia held it up to the harsh fluorescent light, inspecting it like a pawnbroker. The blue diamond sparkled, mocking me with its beauty. "God, it is gorgeous," she murmured, sliding it onto her own pinky finger. "It is a little big, but I can have it resized." "You are stealing from me," I said, panting from the exertion. "I am safeguarding it," she corrected, admiring her hand. "Crazy people do not need diamonds, Elena. They need straitjackets. Besides, this ring deserves to be worn by someone who appreciates the finer things, not someone who spends her days in a lab coat smelling like chemicals." She looked at me with a smirk that chilled me to the bone. "Consider it a down payment," she said, "for all the trouble you have caused us." She turned to leave the ring, flashing on her finger. "Come on, Caleb," she said. "Let her rot in here for the night. The doctor will be here in the morning to administer the shock therapy. That should wipe whatever is left of her memory." Caleb looked at me one last time. There was no regret in his eyes, only the empty stare of a man who had sold his soul and thought he got a good price. "Sleep tight, darling," he said. They walked out. The heavy steel door slammed shut. The lock engaged with a final, terrifying clank. I was alone. I sat in the silence, the white walls pressing in on me. My finger was bleeding where the ring had been torn off. The physical pain was throbbing, but it was nothing compared to the cold fury that was spreading through my chest. They had taken my freedom. They had taken my name. And now they had taken my legacy. I looked up at the corner of the room where a small ventilation grate was screwed into the ceiling. To the naked eye, it was just an air vent, but to me, it was a lifeline. I stood up, wiping the blood from my finger onto my white pants. I walked over to the wall and leaned against it, closing my eyes. They thought they had stripped me of everything. They thought that without the ring, without the phone, and without the title, I was nothing. But they forgot one thing. I was not defined by the diamond on my finger. I was defined by the pressure that created it, and I was about to show them exactly how hard I could be. The heavy steel door had been closed for what felt like hours, but my internal clock told me it had only been 45 minutes. Time moves differently in a sensory deprivation room. The silence is not just an absence of sound, it is a physical weight that presses against your eardrums, trying to force its way into your thoughts. Most people would have started to panic by now. They would have started screaming, pounding on the padded walls, exhausting themselves before the real negotiation even began. But I sat perfectly still on the metal chair, my hands folded in my lap, my breathing slow and rhythmic. I was not waiting for a savior. I was waiting for my cue. I heard the keypad beep outside. 4 distinct tones, followed by the mechanical clunk of the deadbolt retracting. I instantly shifted my posture. I slumped my shoulders forward, let my head hang heavy, and forced a tremor into my hands. I summoned the memory of the time I broke my leg, skiing the sheer physical helplessness I had felt back then to coat my eyes with a glaze of genuine fear. The door opened. Caleb walked in alone. He was carrying a bottle of water and the clipboard with the transfer documents. He looked tired. His tie loosened, his sleeves rolled up. But there was a frenetic energy beneath his exhaustion, the buzzing adrenaline of a gambler who has pushed all his chips into the center of the table and is waiting for the river card. He closed the door behind him but did not lock it. He dragged the cot from the corner and sat down facing me, his knees almost touching mine. He placed the water bottle on the floor and held the clipboard against his chest like a shield. "How are you feeling, Elena?" he asked, his voice dropping to that soft, solicitous register he used when he wanted something. I lifted my head slowly, blinking as if the harsh fluorescent light hurt my eyes. "Thirsty," I whispered, my voice rasping. "My head spins." "Here," he said, unscrewing the cap of the water bottle and holding it out. "Drink something. You are dehydrated." I looked at the water. I knew better than to drink anything he offered. The seal on the cap had been broken. It was likely spiked with a sedative or another dose of the scopolamine to keep me pliable. I pushed his hand away weakly, spilling a little water on his expensive trousers. "No," I cried out, pulling back into the chair. "I do not want it. I want to go home, Caleb, please. Why are you doing this to me?" Caleb sighed, placing the bottle on the floor with an exaggerated patience. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I am not doing anything to you, Elena. You are doing this to yourself. You are sick. You are not thinking clearly. If you would just sign the papers, we could get you out of this room. We could get you into a nice, comfortable suite upstairs. You could sleep in a real bed." He held out the clipboard again, the pen dangling from a string. "Just sign the transfer," he urged. "It grants me control of the voting shares and the liquid assets for 90 days. That is all. Just 90 days, so I can stabilize the company while you recover." I looked at him, my eyes filling with tears. I reached out and grabbed his hand, my fingers digging into his skin. I needed him to feel my desperation. I needed him to believe that I was breaking. "Caleb, please," I begged. "We can work this out. You want money. I can give you money. We do not need lawyers. We do not need doctors. Just take me home. I will write you a check. I will give you whatever you want. Just do not leave me here." He looked at me, and for a second, I saw a flicker of hesitation. Not guilt, but calculation. He was wondering if a check would be easier, but then he remembered the debt he was in. He remembered the hole he had dug for himself that was too deep for a simple check to fill. He needed everything. He needed the empire. "It is too late for that, Elena," he said, pulling his hand away. "The process has already started. The board has been notified of your condition. If I back down now, I look incompetent. And you, well, you look unstable regardless." He stood up, pacing the small room. "You have to understand," he continued, sounding almost like he was trying to convince himself. "I am doing this for us. You are too conservative with the business. You are sitting on billions in capital, letting it rot in low-yield bonds. I have vision, Elena. I can double our worth in a year. But you never listen to me. You treat me like a child." So this was it. His ego. The fragile male ego that could not handle a wife who was smarter, richer, and more successful than he would ever be. I sank lower in the chair, letting a sob escape my throat. "I am sorry," I wept, burying my face in my hands. "I am so sorry, Caleb. I will change. I promise. Just please, do not hurt me." Caleb stopped pacing. He looked down at me, his shadow falling over my cowering form. The sight of me broken and begging seemed to trigger something in him, a dark twist of satisfaction. He liked this. He liked seeing the powerful Elena Calloway reduced to a weeping mess. He walked over and crouched down again, getting right in my face. He reached out and tilted my chin up, forcing me to look him in the eye. There was no love in his gaze, only the cold, dead stare of a predator playing with its food. "You are scared," he observed, a small smile playing on his lips. "Good. You should be." He leaned in closer, his breath hot against my ear. He lowered his voice to a whisper, ensuring that even if there were microphones outside the room, only I would hear this. He wanted to savor the threat. He wanted it to be intimate. "My love." He whispered the endearment, sounding like a curse. "You think the coffee was the only thing I gave you?" I froze. I stopped crying. I stared at him wide-eyed. "What do you mean?" I breathed. Caleb chuckled, a low vibration that I felt in my chest. The scopolamine in the coffee was just the primer, he explained, his eyes dancing with malice. "It makes you suggestible. But what I put in this water, what I have in the syringe waiting upstairs, that is the closer." He tapped the clipboard with his index finger. Actually, the drug hasn't even fully dissolved in your system yet, he lied, trying to terrify me. But the next dose. The one Dr. Aris is preparing right now. It is a cocktail of antipsychotics and sedatives that we usually reserve for the violently insane. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. If you do not sign this transfer right now, Elena, if you force me to bring the doctor down here, that injection will fry your neural pathways. You won't just be confused. You will be gone. The lights will be on, but nobody will be home. You will be a vegetable, Elena. A drooling, silent vegetable that I can park in a nursing home and visit once a year while I spend your money. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The confession, the threat of grievous bodily harm, the intent to cause permanent disability. He had just admitted that he wasn't trying to heal me. He was trying to lobotomize me. Is that what you want? He asked, soft and deadly. Do you want to spend the rest of your life staring at a wall, unable to remember your own name? Or do you want to sign the paper and live to fight another day? I looked at him. I looked at the man I had vowed to love and cherish, and in that moment the last shred of sentimentality evaporated from my soul. He was not my husband. He was a monster. And monsters do not get mercy. I let out a shaky breath, acting as if his threat had finally broken my spirit completely. I let my shoulders slump in total defeat. I do not want to die, I whispered. Then sign. Caleb commanded, shoving the pen into my hand. I took the pen. My hand trembled violently. I looked at the paper, the words blurring through my tears. I will sign, I said, my voice barely audible. Good girl, Caleb said, patting my head like I was a dog. I knew you would see reason. I lowered the pen to the paper, but inside my mind I was smiling. I was screaming with triumph, because I had it. I had the recording. I had the biometric data of my elevated heart rate confirming my distress, and now I had his verbal confirmation of premeditated assault. He thought he had just won the game. He had no idea he had just handed me the murder weapon. Caleb opened the door and signaled into the hallway. A moment later, Arthur Sterling walked in. The lawyer looked out of place in the sterile white room with his pinstripe suit and his Italian leather shoes, but his expression fit the environment perfectly. It was the look of a man who had surgically removed his conscience years ago to make room for more ambition. He carried a thick leather binder, not a simple clipboard this time. This was the master document, the endgame. Sterling placed the binder on the small metal table Caleb had dragged in. The sound of the heavy paper hitting the surface echoed in the small room like a judge's gavel. He opened it with a flourish, revealing page after page of dense legal text. The full durable power of Attorney Sterling announced, his voice lacking any warmth, coupled with a voluntary commitment form and a transfer of assets agreement. It gives Mr. Danner complete control over your financial, physical, and medical decisions. It is irrevocable without a court order, which, given your current mental state, will be impossible to obtain. He uncapped a fountain pen. It was a Mont Blanc. I recognized it because I had bought it for Caleb as a graduation gift when he finally finished his MBA. The irony was so thick I could taste it. They were using my own gift to sign away my life. Sterling held the pen out to me. The gold nib glinted under the harsh fluorescent lights. Sign at the bottom of page 14 and 12, he instructed. An initial every other page. I looked at the pen, then at Caleb. He was standing with his arms crossed, leaning against the padded wall. His face was a mask of triumph. He thought he had broken me. He thought the threat of the injection had turned me into a compliant little doll. I reached out with my hand, trembling violently. I let my fingers spasm as I grasped the pen, making sure I dropped it once before getting a firm grip. Oops, I whispered, my voice sounding small and terrified. I am sorry. My hands. Pick it up. Caleb snapped, his patience wearing thin. I bent down slowly, retrieving the pen. I took a deep breath, letting my chest heave with a sob. I wanted them to see the fear. I wanted them to feed on it, because the more they focused on my fear, the less they would focus on the paper. I pulled the binder closer. I pretended to struggle with the focus of my eyes, squinting at the text. I cannot read it, I said. The letters are moving. You do not need to read it. Elena Sterling said dismissively. "It just says what we discussed. You are sick. We are helping. Just sign the line next to the yellow sticky note." I looked at the line. Grantor signature, Elena Calloway. It looked so simple, just a line of ink. But that line represented 3 generations of hard work. It represented the patents my grandfather developed. It represented the sleepless nights my father spent building the distribution network. It represented every sacrifice I had made to keep the company solvent during the recession. And they wanted to take it all with a scribble. I looked up at them. The room seemed to have shrunk. They were crowding around me now. Patricia had entered quietly, standing behind Sterling. Jessica was peering over Caleb's shoulder. They were like a pack of hyenas, circling a wounded gazelle, waiting for the moment the heart stopped beating so they could tear into the flesh. Their eyes were wide, dilated. They were not looking at me. They were looking at the pen. They were mentally spending the money already. Patricia was probably picturing her new yacht. Caleb was imagining the look on his friends' faces when he walked into the boardroom as CEO. Jessica was likely planning which of my properties she would claim as her own. The greed in the room was palpable. It was a physical stench, sweaty and metallic. I lowered the pen to the paper. I felt the texture of the document under my wrist. It was high-quality bond paper, archival grade. Sterling had spared no expense for his crime. I hesitated. "Do I have to—" I asked one last time, looking at Caleb. "Sign it," he growled, stepping forward and looming over me. "Sign it now, or I go get the doctor." I nodded quickly, cowering away from him. Okay. I am signing." I pressed the nib to the paper. The ink flowed smooth and black. I started to write. E-L-E-N-A. My hand shook, making the letters jagged and uneven. It looked exactly like the handwriting of a woman under the influence of strong sedatives. It was perfect. But as I moved to the last name, I made a split-second calculation. My legal signature, the one on file with the banks, the one on my driver's license, and the corporate charter was Elena J. Calloway. The J stood for Jane, my mother's name. Every check I signed, every contract I authorized always included that middle initial. It was a habit my father had drilled into me. Precision, Elena. Always precision. But today, I was not Elena J. Calloway. Today I was a victim. Today I was a hostage. I skipped the initial. I wrote Elena Calloway. And then, at the very end of the Y, I added a small, almost imperceptible dot inside the tail of the letter. To the untrained eye, it looked like a slip of the pen, a twitch of a drugged hand. But to the AI fraud detection system at the Callaway Sovereign Bank, and to my personal legal team, that dot was a nuclear launch code. It was the duress marker. Years ago, after a high-profile kidnapping of a competitor's CEO, my father had hired a kidnapping consultant. We had spent weeks practicing this. If you are ever forced to sign anything he had told me you sign without your middle initial and you dot the tail of the last letter, that tells us you are alive but you are not free. I finished the signature and lifted the pen. "There," I whispered. "It is done." Sterling snatched the binder away before the ink was even dry. He flipped through the pages, checking the signature. He looked at it. He saw the name. He saw the jagged lines. But he did not see the missing initial. He did not see the dot. He was too arrogant. He thought he was smarter than me. "It looks valid," Sterling said, a grin spreading across his face, revealing his yellowed teeth. "It is messy, but it is identifiable. It will hold up in court." Patricia let out a breath she had been holding. She clapped her hands together, a sharp, joyous sound that felt obscene in the torture chamber. "Finally," she exclaimed. She walked over and patted my cheek, not gently, but with a degrading tap. "You did the right thing, Elena. Now you can rest." Caleb took the binder from Sterling and stared at it. He ran his finger over my signature, smudging the ink slightly. He looked like a man who had just found the Holy Grail. "I am CEO," he muttered to himself. "I am actually the CEO." He looked at me, and for the first time in hours, the malice in his eyes was replaced by sheer, unadulterated ego. "You see, Elena," he said, straightening his tie, "it wasn't that hard, was it? Now I can fix everything you broke. I can finally run this company the way it deserves to be run. He turned to the lawyer. File it electronically, he ordered. Right now. I want access to the accounts by the time the market opens. Sterling nodded, pulling a tablet from his briefcase. Already on it, Mr. Danner. I am uploading the scan to the court portal and the bank's secure server as we speak. I sat back in the chair, clasping my hands together to stop them from shaking. But now the shaking wasn't from acting. It was from the adrenaline of the kill. They were doing exactly what I wanted. They were uploading the document. They were sending the duress marker directly into the heart of the digital fortress I had built. I watched Sterling tap the screen. I watched the progress bar load. Sending, sent. Confirmation received, Sterling said. The document is filed. The bank should process the transfer of authority within minutes. Caleb let out a whoop of joy. He grabbed Jessica and spun her around. Patricia was laughing, checking her reflection in her compact mirror, already looking younger. They were celebrating. They were popping champagne in their minds. They did not hear the sound of the silent alarm that had just been tripped in a server room in Manhattan. They did not see the red flags popping up on the screens of the Callaway security team. They did not know that by uploading that document, they had just authorized a full-scale tactical response. I looked at the clock on the wall of my mind, T-minus 2 minutes. I looked at Caleb. Can I have some water now, I asked, keeping my voice weak. Caleb laughed. He felt generous now. He felt like a king. Give her the water, he said to Jessica. Hell, give her a glass of wine. She paid for it after all. Jessica kicked the water bottle toward me. Get it yourself, she sneered. I bent down and picked up the bottle. I unscrewed the cap and took a sip. It was warm and tasted of plastic, but to me it tasted like victory. I sat up straight. I pushed my hair out of my face. I wiped the fake tears from my cheeks. Thank you, Caleb, I said. My voice suddenly clear, steady, and devoid of any slur. He turned to look at me, surprised by the change in my tone. What did you say, he asked. I said thank you, I repeated, staring him dead in the eyes. You just gave me everything I needed. Caleb frowned, confusion clouding his excitement. What are you talking about? You just gave us everything. You are nothing now, Elena. You are a ward of the state. I smiled. It was not the smile of a victim. It was the smile of the CEO of Callaway Pharmaceuticals. I glanced at the door. You might want to check that tablet again, Mr. Sterling, I said coolly. I think you will find that the bank has a very specific protocol for signatures that are missing a middle initial. Sterling froze. He looked down at the tablet. His face went pale. Mr. Danner? He stammered. What? Caleb snapped. What is it? Sterling turned the tablet around. The screen was flashing a bright, urgent red. Error. Fraud detected. Biometric mismatch. Security protocol. Alpha initiated. Authorities notified. What does that mean? Caleb screamed, grabbing the tablet. It means, I said, standing up and smoothing the wrinkles from my clothes, that you are not the CEO, Caleb. I took a step toward them, and for the first time they backed away. It means, I continued, my voice rising with the power of absolute authority, that you are currently trespassing on a secure facility. It means that the accounts you are trying to access have just been locked down by the FBI. And it means that the man standing outside that door is not Dr. Eris. As if on cue, a deafening boom shook the room. The heavy steel door was not opened with a code. It was blown off its hinges. Smoke filled the hallway. Red laser sights cut through the dust, dancing on Caleb's chest. And through the smoke walked Marcus. But he wasn't wearing his hoodie. He was wearing full tactical gear with a badge on his chest that shone brighter than any diamond. And he wasn't alone. Game over, Caleb, I said. Caleb stared at the screen, his eyes bulging from their sockets, as the red light from the tablet reflected on his sweaty face, making him look demonic, and he swiped furiously at the glass, as if he could erase the digital judgment with his thumb. What the hell is this? He screamed, his voice cracking into a high-pitched shriek of disbelief. Denied. What does it mean? Denied. It says, authorization rejected, fraudulent activity detected. He turned on Sterling, grabbing the lawyer by the lapels of his expensive suit and shaking him violently. You said it was foolproof, Caleb yelled. You said the signature was enough, so why is it locking me out? Sterling was trembling. his face ashen and sweat dripping down his temples. "I do not know," the lawyer stammered. "The system recognized the signature, but it flagged a security breach, and it is like it knew she was under duress." Patricia rushed forward, snatching the tablet from Caleb's hand, and she looked at the screen, and then she looked at me with venom in her eyes. "You did something," she hissed. "You little witch, you did something to the paper." This was the moment, the exact second I had been waiting for since I first tasted the almond syrup in Penn Station. I stopped shaking instantly. The tremors in my hands vanished, and the hunch in my shoulders straightened as I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the stale air of the interrogation room, and then I let it out in a long, slow sigh of relief. It was the relief of an actor stepping off stage after a grueling 3-hour performance. I reached up and wiped the corner of my mouth where I had allowed a small amount of saliva to gather to sell the image of a drugged woman, and I smoothed my hair back from my forehead, revealing my eyes. They were clear, they were sharp, and they were looking at Caleb with the cold precision of a scientist examining a specimen under a microscope. I stood up. I did not stumble and I did not sway, but rather, I rose from that metal chair with the grace and stability of a woman who runs a Fortune 500 company. The room went silent as Caleb, Patricia, Jessica, and Sterling froze, watching my transformation with a mixture of confusion and dawning horror, as if they were watching a corpse rise from the dead. "Caleb," I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel. He flinched because he had not heard that voice in months, as it was not the voice of his submissive wife, but the voice of Dr. Elena Calloway. "You make terrible coffee," I said, taking a step toward him. Caleb took a step back, hitting the padded wall, and whispered, "What?" I said, "You make terrible coffee." I repeated, my tone conversational, almost bored. "Next time, do not use scopolamine from the black market, because it has a distinct metallic acidity that the sugar cannot hide, especially not when you use cheap almond syrup." I tilted my head, watching his jaw drop. "You see, Caleb?" I continued lecturing him, as if he were a failing student. "Scopolamine hydrobromide, especially the unrefined kind you bought from that dealer in the Bronx, creates a very specific reaction when mixed with heat. It creates a sour aftertaste that sits on the back of the tongue. Any first-year pharmacy student could identify it, and since I hold a PhD in pharmacology, I identified it before the cup even touched my lips." "You knew," Caleb stammered, his face pale. "But you drank it, and we saw you fall asleep, and we saw the symptoms." I laughed, and it was a dark, genuine laugh that echoed in the small room. "I saw you watching me," I corrected him. "I gave you the symptoms you expected to see, like dilated pupils and slurred speech and confusion. It is called the placebo effect, Caleb, but in reverse. I acted out the side effects because I needed you to feel safe, and I needed you to feel arrogant enough to bring me here to this house." I gestured to the room around us. "I needed you to commit a federal crime on camera," I explained. "And you did not disappoint because you gave me kidnapping, assault, forced medication fraud, and finally attempted murder." Caleb looked at the syringe on the table, the one he had threatened me with earlier, and then looked back at me with terror. "You were never drugged," Jessica whispered, her face ghost white. "This whole time you were faking." "Not the whole time," I said, turning to her. "I was genuinely disgusted by your behavior, and that part was real." I turned back to Caleb, who looked small now as the arrogance that had fueled him for the last few hours was draining away, leaving behind a terrified little boy. But the signature Sterling interrupted his lawyer brain, trying to find a loophole. "You signed the document, and it is a legal signature, so we have it." "Did you look at the Y, Mr. Sterling?" I asked. "Did you notice the dot inside the tail?" Sterling blinked and asked, "The dot." "It is a distress marker," I said. "My father implemented it into the bank's security protocol 20 years ago. If my signature appears on any transfer document over $10,000, with that specific alteration, the system automatically freezes all assets, locks the accounts, and notifies the FBI that the signatory is under extreme duress." I took another step toward Caleb until I was standing toe-to-toe with him, and I could smell the fear on him, which smelled like sweat and cheap cologne. "So when you hit send," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, "you did not steal my company. You just rang the alarm bell. You called the police on yourself, Caleb." The heavy steel door swung open with a smooth, mechanical glide that was far more terrifying than if it had been kicked down. It did not slam against the wall. It simply opened to reveal the hallway that was now filled with a blinding white light. Caleb scrambled back, tripping over his own feet and crashing into the metal table. Patricia let out a strangled gasp, clutching her stolen diamond ring to her chest as if it could protect her from what was coming. Jessica shrank into the corner, her glass of wine slipping from her fingers and shattering on the floor. Standing in the doorway was Marcus. But this was not the Marcus they knew. This was not the quiet brother-in-law who wore faded jeans to Sunday dinner and endured their passive-aggressive insults with a polite smile. This was not the man they joked about behind his back, calling him the charity case of the family. The man standing in the doorway was a weapon. He was dressed in the charcoal gray tactical suit of a high-level private military contractor. On his chest was a badge I recognized intimately because I signed the checks for the company that issued it. It was the insignia of Aegis Prime Security, the elite firm that handled protection for heads of state and Fortune 500 CEOs. He wore an earpiece, and his posture was one of relaxed lethality. His hands were empty, but the way he stood suggested he could dismantle everyone in the room in under 3 seconds without breaking a sweat. Behind him flowed a stream of men and women in sharp business attire, carrying briefcases and tablets. They moved with the synchronized efficiency of a swarm of killer bees. This was the legal strike team of the Callaway Group. Marcus stepped into the room. He did not look at his wife, Jessica. He did not look at Caleb or Patricia. He looked directly at me. "Target secured," Marcus said into his comms, his voice clipped and professional. "Principal is unharmed. Proceed with containment." Jessica squeaked, her voice trembling. "What are you doing? Why are you wearing that?" Marcus finally turned to her. His expression was not angry. It was indifferent. It was the look of a man who had been doing a job for a very long time and was finally allowed to clock out. "I am working, Jessica," he said simply. "I have been head of counter-surveillance for Mrs. Callaway for 6 months. You would know that if you ever asked me about my day instead of asking me to fix your car." Caleb found his voice then. He stood up, trying to summon the remnants of his authority. "You work for her!" he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You traitor! This is a family matter. Get out! I am the husband. I am the guardian." Marcus didn't even blink. He just stepped aside to clear the line of sight for the woman standing behind him. My lead counsel, Sarah Jenkins, stepped forward. She was a shark in a silk blouse holding a tablet that was displaying a live deed of ownership. "Actually, Mr. Danner." Sarah said, her voice cool and crisp. "You are the intruder here." Caleb looked confused. "What are you talking about?" he demanded. "I rented this facility. I paid the deposit. Dr. Aris gave me the keys." I laughed. It was a soft sound, but in the silence of the room it hit like a sledgehammer. "Oh, Caleb," I said, shaking my head. "Dr. Aris does not own this building. He is just a tenant whose lease expired last week." I walked over to the wall, running my hand along the padded surface. "I knew you were looking for a place to stash me," I explained. "My team has been monitoring your search history for months. When you started looking at private sanitariums in the upstate area, we flagged this one as your most likely choice because it was cheap, isolated, and corrupt." I turned to face them, my eyes locking onto Patricia's horrified face. "So I bought it." The silence that followed was absolute. "You what?" Caleb whispered. "I bought the building, Caleb," I said, enunciating every word. "I bought the land. I bought the holding company that manages the facility. I purchased the entire property last Tuesday through a shell corporation called Nemesis LLC. I spread my arms wide, gesturing to the sterile white hell they had locked me in. "You are not kidnapping me in a secret prison, Caleb. You are holding me hostage in my own guest bedroom. You are trespassing on private property owned by the very woman you are trying to declare incompetent." Patricia slumped against the wall, her legs giving out. She looked around the room as if the walls were suddenly closing in on her. "This is a trap," she murmured. "The whole thing. It was a trap." I nodded. "A very expensive trap," I agreed, "but worth every penny to see the look on your face right now." Caleb looked desperately at the camera in the corner, the one he had used to record his fake plea for help. But the evidence, he stammered. The video. I have the video of you looking crazy. I turned the cameras off after I recorded it. I control the feed. I looked at Marcus and smiled. Go ahead, Marcus, I said. Tell him. Marcus tapped his tablet and projected a hologram onto the wall. It showed a split-screen view of the room we were standing in. You controlled the local recording. Caleb, Marcus explained, his voice lacking any sympathy. You turned off the DVR in the basement, but you didn't know about the secondary hardline we installed when we bought the place. He swiped the screen. Every camera in this room and every microphone in the hallway has been live streaming directly to a secure cloud server for the last 3 hours, Marcus continued. We have everything, Caleb. We have the audio of you admitting to the drugging. We have the video of Patricia stealing the ring. We have the footage of Sterling coercing a signature. And we have the biometric data proving Elena was under duress. I walked up to Caleb until I was inches from his face. You thought you were making a home movie for a judge, I whispered. I pointed to the blinking red light on the smoke detector above us. But you were actually starring in a federal indictment. And the audience is the District Attorney of New York, who is currently watching this feed from her office. Caleb looked at the smoke detector. Then he looked at me. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He wasn't just beaten. He was obliterated. He dropped to his knees. It wasn't a dramatic gesture of begging. It was just gravity taking over a body that no longer had a future to hold it up. I looked down at him, feeling nothing but a cool sense of finality. Get them out of my house, Marcus, I said, turning my back on them. I have a company to run. Sarah handed me the iPad, and the screen was glowing with the interface of the Callaway forensic accounting software, which was a dashboard of doom that I had spent the last 3 weeks building. I walked over to where Caleb was kneeling on the floor, his expensive suit ruined by the dust of the interrogation room, and he looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes, expecting mercy, or perhaps a final shout of anger. But I did not shout, because shouting is for people who have lost control, and I had never been more in control in my life. Look at this, Caleb, I said, holding the screen in front of his face. He squinted at the numbers and the graphs that were cascading down the display in a waterfall of red. What is that? He mumbled. That is Janus Holdings, I explained. It is the shell company you set up to hide the $50,000 you stole from our joint account and the crypto wallet where you tried to wash the money. Caleb shook his head, trying to deny it. I was investing, he stammered. I was going to pay it back. It does not matter what you intended, I interrupted him, because the law deals in facts, not intentions. I swiped the screen to reveal a formal letterhead from the Securities and Exchange Commission. You see, Caleb, when I noticed the unauthorized transfer 3 months ago, I did not just get mad, I got curious. I flagged the transaction as suspicious activity within my own bank. I reported you for structuring and potential money laundering. His jaw dropped. You reported your own husband, he whispered. I reported a financial criminal, I corrected him. As of 10 minutes ago, the FBI has frozen every asset attached to your Social Security number. Your checking account is locked, your credit cards are dead, and that little crypto wallet you thought was untraceable has been seized by the Cyber Crimes Division. You are not just broke. Caleb, you are negative. You have no money for a lawyer, you have no money for bail, and you do not even have enough money to buy a cup of that terrible coffee you tried to poison me with. Caleb slumped forward, putting his head in his hands, letting out a guttural sound of defeat. I turned away from him because he was no longer a threat. He was just a statistic. I walked over to Patricia, who was still clutching her chest, trying to blend into the padded wall. She looked at me with a mixture of fear and haughty indignation. You cannot touch me, she spat, trying to regain her composure. I am a respected business owner, and I had nothing to do with Caleb's financial mess. No, I agreed you are smarter than Caleb when it comes to money, but you are much stupider when it comes to inventory management. I tapped the screen, bringing up a new document. This one was a scanned inventory log from the medical supply closet of the boutique med spa you own in Scarsdale. Patricia's eyes went wide. Do you recognize this batch number? I asked, pointing to the highlighted row. It is for pharmaceutical-grade scopolamine hydrobromide. It is a controlled substance, Patricia, strictly regulated by the FDA. And according to this log, 3 vials went missing last week, signed out by you personally. She started to shake her head, her perfectly coiffed hair trembling. I use it for procedures. She lied. It is for clients. I swiped to the next image, which was a photo of the vial Caleb had used earlier tonight, the one Marcus's team had recovered from the trash can in the kitchen upstairs. The batch numbers match Patricia. I said, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper, "You supplied the weapon used in a kidnapping and attempted murder. But that is not the worst part." I leaned in closer so she could see the cold satisfaction in my eyes. "Since you transported a controlled substance across state lines to commit a felony, this is now a DEA matter. My lawyers have already forwarded this evidence to federal prosecutors. By tomorrow morning, your med spa will be raided, your license will be revoked, and every dime you have ever made will be seized under civil asset forfeiture laws. You are not going to retirement, Patricia. You are going to federal prison, and you will go there penniless." She let out a high-pitched wail and slid down the wall, collapsing into a heap of fur and fake diamonds. Finally, I turned to Jessica. She was standing by the door looking terrified but also defiant, as if she believed she was somehow exempt from the carnage because she hadn't physically touched me. "I did not do anything," she said, her voice shrill. "I just stood here. You cannot arrest me for standing here." "No," I said, walking toward her. "I cannot arrest you for standing there, but I can certainly fire you for what you did while you were standing there." Jessica blinked, confusion warring with her fear. "Fire me?" she asked. "You do not have the authority to fire me. I work for the marketing division, not your personal staff." I tapped the tablet one last time, bringing up a series of emails. "Actually, Jessica, as the majority shareholder of the Callaway Group, I have the authority to fire anyone I want, but in your case, it is not just a firing, it is a termination for cause." I showed her the screen. It displayed a thread of encrypted emails between her personal account and our biggest competitor, Pfizer. "You have been leaking our R&D projected timelines for 6 months," I said. "You sold our secrets for a few designer handbags and a promise of a promotion that was never coming." Jessica gasped, reaching out as if to cover the screen. "How did you get those?" she shrieked. "Those are private!" I pointed to Marcus, who was standing guard by the door, his face impassive. "You called my head of security useless earlier tonight," I reminded her. "You said he was just a charity case. Well, that charity case has been monitoring your network traffic since Christmas." Marcus collected every email, every attachment, and every bank transfer from the competitor. He built the case against you brick by brick while you were busy mocking him at family dinners. Jessica looked at Marcus, betrayal written all over her face. "Marcus," she pleaded, "tell her it is not true. I am your wife." Marcus looked at her and his expression was stone cold. "You are an operational liability, Jessica," he said, his voice void of any emotion. "And you are fired." I turned back to her, delivering the final blow. "Not only are you fired effective immediately, but our legal team has just filed a civil suit against you for corporate espionage and breach of contract. We are suing you for $3 million in damages. Since you do not have $3 million, we will be garnishing your wages for the rest of your life. You will never work in this industry again, and you will spend the next 20 years paying me back for every secret you stole." Jessica burst into tears, sobbing uncontrollably as the reality of her future crashed down on her. I looked at the three of them. Caleb, the bankrupt fraud, Patricia, the felon, and Jessica, the disgraced spy. They were not a family anymore. They were a crime scene. I handed the iPad back to Sarah Jenkins and smoothed the front of my blouse. "They are all yours, Sarah," I said. "Make sure the police know that the Callaway Group intends to prosecute to the fullest extent of the law." I turned to Marcus. "Take me home," I said. "I have an early meeting tomorrow and I need to wash the smell of this place off me." As we walked out of the room, leaving the wailing ruin of the Danner family behind me, I felt a profound sense of peace. They had tried to take my money, my freedom, and my mind. But in the end, all they had done was balance my books. As the legal team ushered the police into the room, the atmosphere shifted from corporate sterile to chaotic justice. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut echoed off the white padded walls, a rhythmic clicking that sounded like music to my ears. Patricia was already being led away, her protest drowned out by the reading of her Miranda rights. She looked old suddenly, the stress of the moment melting away her Botoxed facade to reveal the terrified woman underneath. Jessica was silent, her face buried in her hands as she was escorted out by 2 officers who looked unimpressed by her tears. But Caleb was the one I watched. He had not moved from the floor. He was on his knees, surrounded by the dust of the explosion and the ruin of his life. When he saw the officers approaching him, he seemed to snap. He scrambled toward me, grabbing the hem of my pants, his fingers white with desperation. "Elena, please," he sobbed, his voice cracking. "You cannot let them take me. I am your husband. I love you." I looked down at him, feeling absolutely nothing. It was strange how love could turn to indifference so quickly. It did not even turn to hate, because hate requires energy, and Caleb Danner was no longer worth my energy. "It was her," he cried, pointing a shaking finger at the empty doorway where his mother had just been dragged through. "It was all Patricia. She made me do it, Elena. She said we were losing everything. She said you were holding out on us. I never wanted to hurt you. I just wanted to save the family." I stepped back, dislodging his grip from my leg. I smoothed the fabric where he had touched me, erasing the last physical connection between us. "You wanted to save yourself, Caleb," I said, my voice calm and leveled. "You were willing to erase my mind to pay your gambling debts. Do not insult my intelligence by pretending this was about family." He looked up at me, his eyes wide and wet with tears. He looked pathetic. The arrogant man who had sneered at me on the train, who had threatened to turn me into a vegetable, was gone. In his place was a coward who could not even own his own villainy. "Elena, please," he begged, crawling forward again. "I will do anything. I will sign a post-nuptial. I will give up my shares. Just tell them to stop. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. We can go home. We can start over. I will make it up to you." I looked at Marcus, who was standing by the door watching the scene with his arms crossed. He gave me a small nod, a silent confirmation that everything was secure. I looked back at Caleb. I remembered what he had whispered to me in the train station just a few hours ago. He had been so sure of his power then. He had been so delighted by the idea of destroying me. "You know, Caleb," I said, crouching down so I was eye level with him, but just out of his reach. "You were right about one thing." He blinked, hope flickering in his eyes. "I was?" he asked, breathless. "Yes," I said, a small, cold smile playing on my lips. "You told me that in an hour I would not remember my name." I checked my watch. The crystal face glinted in the harsh light. "But you got the details wrong," I continued. "I will remember my name perfectly. It is Elena Calloway. It is the name on the building. It is the name on the checks. And it is the name on the restraining order my lawyers are filing right now." I stood up, towering over him. "But in an hour," I said, my voice dropping to a final whisper, "I won't remember your name. Because to me, you are not Caleb anymore. You are not my husband. You are just inmate number 74,390 in a case file that I will never open again." I turned my back on him. "Get him out of here, Marcus," I said. As I walked out of the room into the cool night air, I heard Caleb screaming my name, but I did not turn around. I did not falter. I just kept walking toward the waiting limousine, ready to start the rest of my life. 6 months later, the air in Paris smelled of rain and roasted chestnuts. I sat at a small round table outside a cafe in the Marais district, watching the Parisians rush by in their chic coats. On the table in front of me sat a simple white cup of coffee. I picked it up and inhaled the aroma. It was rich, dark, and completely free of almond syrup. I took a sip, savoring the bitterness. It tasted like freedom. I had been in Europe for 3 weeks, taking the vacation I had denied myself for years. But this wasn't just a holiday. It was a victory lap. Since that night in the upstate facility, the Calloway Group stock had risen 40%. The market loved a strong, decisive leader, and my public handling of the attempted hostile takeover had turned me into a bit of a corporate legend. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a video call from New York. I tapped the screen, and Marcus's face appeared. He looked different. The stress lines around his eyes were gone, replaced by a relaxed confidence. He was sitting in his new office at Calloway headquarters, the office that used to belong to the VP of Operations. "Good morning, boss," he said, smiling. "Or is it afternoon over there?" "Afternoon, Marcus," I replied, setting my coffee down. "How is the security audit going?" "Smooth," he said. "We plugged the leaks Jessica left behind. The new protocols are solid, and the board is happy with the quarterly report." I nodded, satisfied. Marcus had transitioned from my personal protector to the director of corporate security with seamless efficiency. He was good at his job, he was loyal, and he was finally getting the respect he deserved. "How are the kids?" I asked, softening my tone. "They are great," Marcus said, his smile widening. "We went to the zoo yesterday. It is nice, Elena. It is quiet, no more yelling, no more drama." He didn't need to say more. I knew the details. The divorce had been finalized last week. With the evidence of Jessica's corporate espionage and her complicity in the kidnapping, Marcus had been awarded full custody of their 2 children. Jessica had fought it, of course, but she had no money, no job, and a criminal record pending. The family court judge had been very unimpressed with her character references, especially since her mother was currently awaiting trial in federal prison. "Speaking of which," Marcus said, his voice lowering slightly, "we got an update on the Danner case." I took another sip of coffee, my pulse remaining steady. "Tell me," I said. "Patricia took a plea deal," Marcus said. "She gave up her supplier for the scopolamine in exchange for a reduced sentence. She got 8 years. She will be 70 when she gets out." "And Caleb?" I asked. Marcus paused. "Caleb refused the deal. He insisted on going to trial. He thought he could charm the jury. He thought he could convince them he was a victim of his mother's manipulation." And I prompted. "The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours," Marcus said. "Guilty on all counts, kidnapping, assault, fraud, and attempted murder. The judge wanted to make an example of him. He got 20 years, Elena. No parole for at least 15. 20 years. I looked out at the street, at the gray sky of Paris. 20 years. By the time Caleb got out, the world would be a completely different place. I would be a different person. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, a weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying. It was the final severance. The last thread of the web they had spun around me was gone. "Good," I said simply. Marcus hesitated for a moment. "There is one more thing," he said. "Caleb sent a letter from Holding. His lawyer tried to pass it to me." I looked at Marcus on the screen. I saw the protectiveness in his eyes. "Did you read it?" I asked. Marcus nodded. "It is just more of the same. He blames the drugs. He blames the pressure. He says he still loves you." I laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Burn it," I said. "Already did," Marcus replied, grinning. I smiled back at him. This was why I had promoted him. He understood the assignment. "Go be with your kids, Marcus," I said. "Take the afternoon off. You earned it." "Thanks, Elena," he said. "Enjoy Paris." The screen went black. I put the phone down and looked at my reflection in the window of the cafe. I looked younger. The tension that had defined my jawline for 3 years was gone. My eyes were bright. I was alone at the table, but I was not lonely. For the first time in my life, I was completely and utterly my own person. I did not answer to a husband who saw me as a bank account. I did not answer to a mother-in-law who saw me as an accessory. I picked up the check the waiter had left. I pulled out my black titanium card, the one with my name embossed in silver. Elena Calloway. No middle initial, no distress dot. Just me. I paid the bill and stood up, buttoning my coat against the chill. As I walked away from the cafe, blending into the crowd of strangers, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. It had started with a poisoned cup of coffee and ended with a champagne toast in Paris. It was a hell of a trip. Before I go, I want to leave you with a final thought. A lesson I learned in the hardest way possible. We are raised to believe that marriage is a partnership. We are taught that love conquers all, that we should share everything with the person we choose to spend our lives with. And that is a beautiful sentiment. But ladies' sentiment does not pay the bills, and it certainly does not hire a legal team. Financial independence is not just about having money to buy shoes. It is about having the power to say no. It is about having the resources to walk away when the person you love turns into a stranger. It is about ensuring that no matter what happens, no matter who betrays you, you always have a parachute. Caleb thought he could break me because he thought my power came from him. He thought that without his approval, without his presence, I would crumble. He didn't realize that my power came from the fact that I signed the checks. Never give up your financial autonomy. Never put your name on a document you haven't read. And never, ever let anyone tell you that you are crazy for trusting your gut. Your intuition is your first line of defense. If something tastes bitter, spit it out. If a situation feels wrong, leave. And if someone tries to take what is yours, remind them exactly who you are. I looked at Marcus, and I saw a good man. I saw a man who had been beaten down by the same people who tried to destroy me, but I also saw a risk. A lot of people ask me why I trusted Marcus so quickly, why I brought him into my inner circle when he was technically part of the enemy camp. It was a gamble. I tested him, I watched him. I made sure his loyalty was to the truth and not just to the highest bidder. So here is my question for you. If you were in my shoes, would you have trusted Marcus right away? Or would you have left him at the train station to fend for himself? Did I take too big of a risk relying on him, or was it the smartest move on the chessboard? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one, and if you enjoyed watching a greedy husband get exactly what he deserved, hit that like button. It helps the channel grow, and it sends a message that we are watching and we are learning. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice, revenge, and women taking back their power. My name is Elena Calloway, and I will see you in the next one.